Hi guys, welcome back to my little sewing channel. Today is so exciting. I'm posting one of my most requested videos, I think ever. We're making the cutest, flowiest, tiered maxi dress. And it's just, I'll be taking you through the entire process of taking basic body measurements, drafting a simple pattern, and sewing. And don't worry, it is beginner friendly. And today's video is extra special because it is sponsored by one of my favorite, this is not a drill, one of my favorite online learning platforms, Skillshare. As we know, summertime is quickly approaching, and summer is when I feel the most inspired to learn a new craft or a skill and do things that I love. So it was the perfect time to learn how to, drumroll please, knit. I've been sewing for almost 10 years and I've wanted to learn how to knit for so long. I found the perfect class on Skillshare called Knitting 101, everything you need to knit with confidence. And let me tell you, it has been an absolute game changer to follow along at my own speed with a human on the screen in front of me, walking me through every single step. If you're not familiar, Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes on film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and so much more. And the best part is they were so kind to give you guys a really great deal for getting started on Skillshare. The first 500 people to use the link in my description and join Skillshare will get a 1-month free trial, thousands of classes for free. So with all that said, let's just jump right in. Let's get started on making this dress. First, we're gonna start by taking some basic measurements and drafting a simple pattern. We're gonna start by drafting the bodice band. This is the little band that goes all the way around the bodice, as you can see. So to draft this, we need our above bust measurement. That is exactly what it sounds like, above the bust. And you want this to be pretty snug, but not so snug to where you can't breathe. Here's my reminder to breathe while you take this measurement. So mine is 33.5 inches. Go ahead and write your measurement down. You'll also want to think about how wide you want your bodice band to be. I wanted mine to be about 2 inches wide. Now let's do some math. You're going to take that above bust circumference. Mine was 33.5 inches. We're going to add 2 inches just to give us some wiggle room and add 1 more inch for seam allowance. And then you're going to half that because you only need the band to go across half of your body. So mine will be 18.25 inches long, or half of that, 9.1/8 if you cut it on the fold. And for the width, this one's much easier. You're going to make it however wide you want the band to be, so 2 inches for me, plus 1 inch for seam allowance. So for me, that would be 3 inches wide. All right, let's go ahead and start cutting. So the fabric that I'm using is this beautiful cotton that I found from the thrift store. And I like to fold my fabric in half and cut everything on the fold just so I don't have to measure as much and everything comes out perfectly symmetrical. So for the bodice band, we need to cut 4 pieces, 2 for the outside and 2 for the lining. So I'm cutting mine 9.1/8 inches by 3 inches, and I'm cutting 4 of those pieces. All right, once that's done, we can move on to the shoulder straps. So we're gonna need to cut 2 shoulder straps. So I'm just measuring where my straps would be and I'm getting as accurate as I can, 17 inches long. And I know I want my straps to be really thin, like 1/2 inch wide. So go ahead and write those measurements down. So now let's do some math. The length of our shoulder straps should be the length that you want plus 1 inch for seam allowance. So for me, 18 inches long, or 9 if you're cutting it on the fold. And the width of the shoulder straps should be whatever width you want times 2 plus 1 inch for seam allowance. So for me, that's 2 inches wide. So for the straps, we're gonna cut 2 pieces just like that. Next, we need to cut a little tie. I wrote that this is optional because I think it looks really cute, but this step is actually not necessary. You can just do a bodice band with a skirt and it would look so cute. So to measure for the tie, I'm gonna measure from my side seam to around where my spine is. And then I'm gonna just figure out how much extra room I need to do a bow in the back. I think usually, rule of thumb, that's like 12 extra inches. And you'll write that measurement down. So the length of the tie, for me, that's 35 inches. We're gonna add 1 inch for seam allowance, and that's 36 inches long, or 18 if you cut it on the fold. And the width of the tie should be however wide you made the bodice band, so that was 2 inches for me, plus 1 inch for seam allowance, so that's 3 inches wide. Super easy. And for the ties, we need to cut 4 pieces, 2 for the outside and 2 for the lining. And this part is also optional. I wanted to give mine a little rounded edge at the end just because I think that makes a bow tie look really cute. So I'm gonna round the edge and do this to all 4 pieces. So just one end is rounded, the other end is straight. All right, let's start sewing. First, can we just admire my beautiful sunroom in the month of May? All right, we're gonna start with the shoulder straps. This is so easy. We're just gonna fold them right sides together, hot dog style, and give them a good press. Just fold them in half. All right, now we just need to sew down the long edges. I'm gonna be sewing just about everything at 1/2 inch seam allowance unless I say otherwise. Before we flip these straps right side out, I always like to trim my seam allowance in half just to get rid of some of the bulky fabric. So I'm just gonna cut the seam allowance in half. Now we'll take a safety pin and feed it through one end. This is my favorite way to flip something right side out. We're just gonna feed the safety pin all the way through until it comes out the other side. And now we have little shoulder straps. We just need to press them nice and flat. Again, this step is optional. I always like to do a little top stitch right on the edge, just for looks. And this is a little tip. If you're ever sewing something really narrow like this, sometimes it helps to pull on the thread tails just a little bit for the first few stitches while it gets started. Otherwise, the feed dogs have a hard time pulling something really narrow through the sewing machine. We're moving on to the little ties. We're gonna put these right sides together 2 at a time. I'm just pinning them all around. And we're gonna sew these all around both ties, leaving the straight edges open. Again, sewing this at 1/2 inch. Now, since we're going around a curve here, this can be a little bit tricky. You just gotta go slow, and I like to actually use the hand wheel to manually turn myself around a really narrow curve like this. It always seems to help. Again, I like to trim my seam allowance in half just to get rid of some of the bulky fabric. This is especially important around curves like this one. You're gonna wanna trim that seam allowance in half. And now we can flip these right side out. So I'm using a knitting needle. This is another one of my favorite ways to flip something right side out when one of the ends is closed. So you just kind of fold it on itself and flip it inside out until it comes out the other end. And now we have some ties. We're just gonna press these nice and flat. And again, you know the drill, this is optional, but I like to top stitch the edge of this. I just think it looks really nice and professional. All right, now let's connect those bodice bands. So let's just imagine 2 of these are for the outside and 2 of them are for the lining. We're just gonna take 2 of them away for now and just focus on the lining. We're actually gonna attach the little ties right now. So taking the straight end, we're gonna put them right sides together on one of the bodice bands. And you wanna make sure that there's about 1/2 inch on each side for seam allowance. We're gonna do this for both waist ties, putting them right sides together, and we're gonna go ahead and sew that down. And this is one of those times we don't need to sew it at 1/2 inch. We can sew this at about 1/4 inch. Once the waist ties are connected to one of the band pieces, we're gonna now take the other band piece and attach it to the other band right sides together so the ties are sandwiched in between. We're gonna go ahead and sew that at 1/2 inch seam allowance. 1/2 inch, I repeat. Next, we'll take the outside band pieces, so not the lining that we just did, but the other 2 pieces. We're gonna put these right sides together and sew them at the side seams. Again, 1/2 inch seam allowance. And like any good sewist does, we need to press our seams nice and flat. So now we have our 2 band pieces. One should have the ties and one should not. Okay, this next step might be a little tough if you don't have a buddy. I don't have a buddy, so we're in this together. I'm gonna put this little band on. Hopefully it fits. Mine fits perfectly. And I'm just gonna figure out where I wanna put these straps. So make sure your side seams are where your side seams should be. I like my straps like perfectly right here in the middle of my shoulder. It's a little bit tricky to pin it in the back, so this is me utterly shocked that I did it all by myself. And as I'm doing this, I'm checking if I need to trim any length off the straps. This would be a good time to trim the straps down if you need to. So I ended up placing my straps about 4.5 inches from the side seam. So I'm just gonna mark that all around just so I have the placement marked. So taking one of our bodice band pieces, we're gonna take the strap, I'm gonna pin it right there where I marked, right sides together. I'll flip the band over and bring the straps up and pin that at the marked points. We're gonna go ahead and sew those pinned edges. And now the straps are attached. All right, so we have one band piece and then we have our other band piece with the ties. We're gonna flip that piece wrong side out. And now we're gonna put it right sides together with the other band piece. So the straps and the ties should be sandwiched between these two band pieces. You wanna make sure the side seams are matched up perfectly, and I'm just gonna pin it all around. And just make sure the straps and the ties aren't twisted or anything before we sew it. And now we can go ahead and sew that pinned edge. And if you feel like this looks a little confusing, don't fret, because this is actually the hardest step of all. So if you can get past this step, you can get past any step. So we're gonna sew that all around. Once that's sewn all around, you know the drill. I like to trim the seam allowance in half to get rid of some of that bulky fabric. So now when we flip that bodice over, you're gonna have your lining piece, your outside piece, the straps and the ties are all attached. Everything is attached. It might look a little confusing, a little bit like a bra, but we're gonna carry on. And we're gonna press our edges nice and flat. And again, this is optional, but I'm gonna go ahead and top stitch all around that neckline area, just because I think it looks nice. It also helps that folded edge to be able to sit nice and flat. And now everything looks good with its little top stitching. And we are ready to move on to the skirt. Congratulations. As you can see, I went for a tiered skirt. I have 3 tiers on my skirt. So let's start with tier 1. To figure out the width, you're gonna make this however wide your bodice band is. So my band is 18 inches wide. You're gonna take that measurement, you're gonna multiply it by 1.5. This gives you enough room to add all of the beautiful gathers. So for me, that's 27 inches wide. And as I said, I have 3 tiers, so figuring out the length is totally up to you. You can either measure all the way down your body and get that full measurement, which is 45 inches for me. You can divide that by 3 and figure out your evenly spaced tiers. But I kind of like the look of not evenly spaced tiers. So I did like 17, 11, and then 15 inches, and I think it looked cute. The only thing you have to remember is to add 1.5 inches seam allowance for the length of each tier. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut my first tier. So again, that's the width of my bodice times 1.5, and then the length is up to you. You just wanna remember to add 1.5 inches for seam allowance. So you'll need 2 pieces for your first tier. We're gonna go ahead and put those pieces right sides together and sew them down the side seams. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can finish your raw edges with a serger, a zigzag stitch, pinking shears, whatever you want. Next, I'm going to go ahead and finish the top and the bottom edges as well. This is going to help because we're about to gather those edges and those can fray and get really messy. Finishing the edges helps a lot. So now all of the edges are finished, we can go ahead and gather. I'm using a straight stitch, my length on 4, and I'm making my tension as tight as it will go. Make sure you have a long thread tail, like 6 or 7 inches. And this is my favorite technique. You're gonna grab onto the thread with your fingers and put even more tension on it, and this will just automatically create gathers. I just learned this technique a few months ago, and I will never do any other technique to make gathers again. It's so easy. And once you get to the end, we're gonna again leave a long thread tail and cut it. And next we'll get ready to attach the bodice. So I'm gonna prep this by folding the edges in by 1/2 inch and pressing them down. I'm doing this to both edges, the lining and the outside piece. And this makes it so much easier for us to sandwich our skirt in between the lining and the outside piece of our bodice band. So match up the side seams of the skirt and the bodice and go ahead and put a pin there. I'll match the other side seam of the bodice and the skirt up. We're gonna put a pin there, and then I'm just gonna go all around sandwiching the skirt in the bodice. And now we're just gonna pull on the gathers or let some gathers out to make it match the circumference of the bodice. And wow, this looks so cute. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew it all around. Once you get to the waist tie, you're gonna go ahead and stop. We're gonna jump over the waist tie and keep sewing. You don't wanna sew that little tie down, that would be detrimental. Once that's done, we're gonna measure the length for our next tier. So however long you wanna make it, remember that measurement. And for the width, that's gonna be however wide the bottom of your skirt is, 26.5 inches for me, times 1.25 or 1.5. It's really up to you. If you want it less gathered, do 1.25. If you want it more gathered, do 1.5. And again, we're just gonna gather the skirt, attach it right sides together to tier 1, and gather it more or let out some gathers to make it match the circumference of the first tier. And then we'll go ahead and sew that down. And I'll repeat that same exact process for the third tier of the skirt. And now all that's left is to hem the bottom of the skirt. So I'm just doing a simple double fold hem. I'm folding it up by 1/2 inch and pressing it down. I'll go ahead and sew that edge, and now our dress is done. Can you believe it? This was my first tiered dress I've actually ever made, and it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. It's so effortless and flowy and beautiful. And something fun about this tie is you can actually tie it in the front or the back, which is fun. We love options. If you do plan on tying it in the front, I would recommend maybe making the tie a little bit shorter. I somehow made mine a little bit too long. That is my one regret of this dress, but overall, I love how this turned out, and I will be wearing this all summer long. Hello, it's me again. Thank you so much for watching this entire video. If you made it to the end, give yourself a pat on the back. You deserved it. If you liked this video or if you learned something, give it a little like. Make sure you're subscribed and comment below if you plan on making this dress. Have you made this dress yet? Did you like it? Do you have any questions? Let me know below. Also follow me on Instagram and TikTok for more sewing fun. And that's all. I hope you have a beautiful day wherever you're at or whatever you're doing, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Oh my gosh. Cute. Okay, bye.